The legend of the Beast of Bray Road has haunted the small town of Elkhorn, Wisconsin for decades. People have told stories of a tall, wolf-like monster lurking in the shadows, watching from the edges of the forest, and sometimes chasing unlucky travelers down the road. Some call it a werewolf, others say it is a demon, or even some unknown animal that science has never named. Whatever it is, the creature has left behind a trail of fear and stories that refuse to die. But one night, the story became more than just a local legend. On this night, a group of U.S. soldiers found themselves face to face with something they could not explain. These were trained men, tough and experienced, armed with weapons and ready for danger. They had faced challenges before, but none of them were prepared for what they were about to meet on Bray Road. It began on a quiet evening. The soldiers were on a routine assignment near the wooded areas of Wisconsin. The air was crisp, and the forest around them seemed calm. The tall trees stood like dark giants, their branches reaching over the road, blocking out the pale light of the moon. The only sounds were the crunch of boots on the gravel, the rustle of wind through the leaves, and the occasional call of a distant owl. At first, it felt like any other night. The men joked quietly, talked about home, and stayed alert for the usual risks that soldiers are trained to expect. But as they moved deeper along the old road, something changed. The air felt heavier, colder, and strangely still. One soldier described it later as if the night itself was watching us. Soon the group started to notice signs that something was off. The woods grew too quiet, unnaturally quiet. The crickets had stopped singing. The night birds were silent. Even the wind seemed to hold its breath. The soldiers exchanged nervous looks. Experienced men know when the forest goes silent. It usually means a predator is near. One of the men swore he saw movement in the trees. Just a shadow at first, tall and upright, slipping between the branches. Another soldier laughed it off, saying it was probably a deer or maybe even a bear. But inside, the men weren't so sure. Bears don't usually follow quietly, step for step, staying just out of sight. As they continued their patrol, the strange feeling grew stronger. They could feel eyes on them. The sensation of being hunted made the hairs on their necks stand up. It was the kind of instinct no training can erase, the primal awareness that something was stalking them. Suddenly, a sound cut through the night. It was a low growl, deep and guttural, echoing from the trees. The men froze. Every instinct told them to be ready. They raised their weapons, scanning the darkness, trying to spot where the sound had come from. Then, just as quickly, the growl was gone. Only silence remained. The tension was thick now. The soldiers pressed on, moving cautiously, weapons at the ready. But the strange noises continued. Twigs snapped behind them. Leaves rustled, though no wind was blowing. A pair of glowing eyes flickered in the distance, watching, then vanishing. One soldier muttered under his breath, "We're not alone out here." And he was right. Because what they were about to face was not a deer, not a bear, not even a wolf. What stalked them in those woods was something far older, far stranger, and far more terrifying. The legend of the Beast of Bray Road was about to come to life before their very eyes. The soldiers had been sent out on what seemed like a simple task. Officially, it was a night patrol through the quiet stretches of Wisconsin farmland near the old Bray Road. Their orders were straightforward: check the area, secure the perimeter, and keep an eye out for anything unusual. Nothing about the mission suggested that danger was expected. The unit was small, no more than half a dozen men. They were armed and trained, used to carrying out duties in silence, used to working as a team in dark and isolated places. To them, this night was just another assignment. Walk the road, scan the forest, stay alert, and report back. The landscape was calm at first glance. Bray Road stretched out before them like a thin ribbon, vanishing into the trees and fields. On either side, tall grasses whispered softly in the breeze. The moon hung low, casting silver light over the road. Their boots pressed against the gravel in steady rhythm, the sound echoing faintly into the stillness. One of the younger soldiers cracked a quiet joke about how boring this mission was going to be. The others chuckled, grateful for the distraction. Out here, miles away from the noise of the city, the world felt empty, and it was easy to forget how quickly silence could turn into something much heavier. As they moved deeper into the wooded area, the men kept to formation, their eyes scanning both sides of the road. They weren't expecting combat, but their training told them to be ready for anything. In the military, routine can become dangerous in an instant, and no one wanted to be caught off guard. Still, none of them thought their biggest worry would be something from a legend. Their radios crackled occasionally with updates from base. Everything seemed normal. The soldiers checked their watches, adjusted their gear, and kept moving forward. But soon, subtle signs began to unsettle them. The air, which had been cool but comfortable, grew oddly heavy. The forest around them seemed to close in. A couple of the men mentioned feeling like they were being watched. It was an instinct they couldn't explain, but it gnawed at them as they walked. One soldier at the back of the group stopped suddenly. He crouched low and pressed his hand to the ground. "Something moved," he whispered. The others froze, weapons raised, scanning the darkness between the trees, but the woods were still. Whatever had moved was gone or hiding. They regrouped and pressed on, though unease began to spread. They had been told their mission was simple, but the soldiers were starting to feel like they were walking into something far more serious. The silence of the night wasn't helping. Normally, the Wisconsin countryside was alive with noise, frogs, crickets, the distant calls of animals. Tonight, it felt as if the entire forest was holding its breath. The road itself seemed to twist and stretch unnaturally as the men continued forward. Every turn looked the same. Trees loomed over them like watchful figures, their branches clawing at the night sky. Shadows shifted in ways that made the men tighten their grip on their weapons. Another soldier spoke up quietly. "Feels like something set's hurting us, pushing us forward." The words unsettled everyone. Nobody replied, but deep down, they all felt it too. The patrol leader signaled for the group to halt. They took a moment to listen, to steady their nerves, but that silence, the unnatural, suffocating silence, only grew heavier. And then, faintly, a sound broke it. A rustling in the bushes, slow, deliberate, like something circling them. The soldiers turned in unison, rifles raised, eyes wide. For a moment they saw nothing. Then, between the trees, 2 points of light appeared, eyes glowing faintly in the darkness. The men froze. They had no orders for this. No training manual had prepared them for staring into eyes that glowed like embers in the forest. The eyes blinked, then vanished into the shadows. The sound of footsteps, heavy, padded, almost animal-like, echoed away into the distance. The patrol leader tried to keep the men calm. He ordered them to stay sharp, to continue the mission, to remember their discipline. They obeyed, but their nerves were on edge now. What kind of animal had eyes like that, and why did it feel like it was following them? Still, they pressed on. That was their job. Soldiers do not abandon a mission just because the woods feel wrong, but with every step they took, the presence in the shadows followed. Always just out of sight, always close enough to be felt. The mission had started simple, but now the soldiers knew they were not just walking a road. They were walking into something far older and far darker than anything their superiors had warned them about. And it was only the beginning. The road stretched on endlessly, swallowed by trees and shadows. The soldiers walked in silence now. Their earlier jokes and chatter gone, something unseen pressed against their nerves, like invisible eyes watching from every angle. They had been in dangerous places before, jungles, deserts, war zones. But this was different. This was not enemy territory. It was something worse. The first signs of the beast were subtle. A crack of twigs in the distance. A faint growl carried on the wind. Every few minutes, one of the men would glance over his shoulder, certain he had seen movement in the brush. The others followed his gaze, but nothing was there, at least, nothing they could see. Then came the eyes. At first, only one soldier saw them, 2 faint orbs glowing from deep within the tree line. They were too high to belong to a fox, too far apart to belong to a deer. He rubbed his eyes, thinking maybe it was a trick of the moonlight. But when he looked again, the eyes were still there, watching, unblinking. He whispered for the others to stop. Weapons raised, the group turned to where he pointed, and then they all saw it. The pair of glowing eyes hovered just above the brush, fixed on them. A low rumble followed, a sound that vibrated through the ground itself. For a moment, nobody moved. It felt like the world had stopped. Then, as quickly as it appeared, the glow vanished. The soldiers exhaled in shaky relief. But that relief didn't last. Seconds later, the sound of heavy, padded footsteps circled behind them. Something was moving with speed and purpose, keeping its distance, but never leaving. The patrol leader whispered, "Stay calm, keep moving." But calm was impossible now. The forest was alive with strange noises. Branches snapped as if something enormous was pushing through. Leaves rustled high in the trees. Though no wind stirred them, somewhere off to the left, another pair of glowing eyes appeared, this time closer. The soldiers formed a defensive circle, rifles aimed outward. Their breathing grew harsh under the weight of silence. The thing in the shadows growled again, and this time it sounded angrier. One soldier muttered, "It sits toying with us." And it was. Every few steps forward, the soldiers felt the creature shadowing them. Sometimes they caught glimpses, a flash of fur, the outline of a hunched figure moving on two legs before dropping low again. It seemed both animal and human, though no one could decide which. The way it moved was wrong. Too fast, too fluid. It darted between trees like a shadow given flesh. The men began to sweat despite the chill in the air. Fear gnawed at them, but they forced themselves forward. They tried to rationalize it. Maybe a wolf? Maybe a bear? Maybe just their nerves? But deep down, every man knew this was no ordinary predator. Wolves don't stand upright. Bears don't stalk prey in silence for miles. And no known animal had eyes that glowed like fire. The night dragged on, every step heavier than the last. The longer they walked, the more aggressive the signs became. At one point, the ground itself shook, as if something massive had landed just out of sight. Branches snapped with such force it sounded like bones breaking. The stench of wet fur and decay drifted through the air, making several men gag. Then came the laughter, or something like it, a chilling sound, half growl, half breath, that seemed to mock them from the dark. The men's discipline was beginning to falter. Their formation loosened, fingers tightened on triggers. Some whispered prayers under their breath. The thing was still not fully visible, but it didn't need to be. Its presence was enough to terrify trained soldiers who had faced human enemies and lived to tell the tale. Finally, one of the men broke. He spun toward the trees and fired a burst of rounds into the darkness. The gunfire shattered the silence, echoing across the forest. For a moment, the creature vanished completely. No sound, no eyes, no movement. The men regrouped, breathing hard, trying to convince themselves the shots had scared it away. But deep down, they knew better. Because as the echo of gunfire faded, another sound rose to replace it, low, guttural, and angry. A growl that turned into a roar. It rolled through the trees with such force that the soldiers felt it vibrate in their chests. Whatever was stalking them wasn't afraid. It was hungry. The first signs were over. The hunt was about to begin. The growl rolled through the forest like thunder. Every soldier froze, weapons raised, eyes scanning the black trees around them. Their breaths came in quick, shallow gasps. Training told them to stay calm, to control their fear, but this was no battlefield. This was something else. Something primal. The growl grew louder. Branches snapped like gunfire. Something massive was moving through the woods, closing in fast. "Contact left," one soldier shouted. The group swung their rifles toward the sound, beams of their flashlights cutting through the trees. For a split second, nothing, then movement. A blur of fur and muscle darted between trunks. It was huge, upright for a moment, then dropping to all fours with unnatural speed. "Hold fire," the patrol leader barked. "Wait until you see it clear." But they didn't have to wait long. From the tree line, it erupted. A figure taller than any man, broad-shouldered and covered in thick, dark fur. Its face was twisted, somewhere between wolf and nightmare, with a muzzle lined in jagged teeth that glistened in the moonlight. Its glowing eyes burned like coals. The Beast of Bray Road had stepped into reality. The soldiers opened fire. Muzzle flashes lit the night, the air filled with the crack of rifles and the acrid scent of gunpowder. The beast staggered as bullets tore into its chest and arms, but instead of falling, it roared, a terrible, inhuman sound that seemed to shake the very ground. Then it charged. Its speed was impossible. One moment it was 20 feet away, the next it was among them. It slammed into the nearest soldier, knocking him off his feet like a rag doll. The man screamed as claws tore through his gear, ripping fabric and flesh. Blood sprayed across the gravel. "Fall back! Fall back!" the leader shouted. The men scrambled, firing as they moved, but the beast was everywhere. It darted in and out of their formation, its movements too fast for the eye to follow. One soldier swore it had vanished into thin air, only to feel hot breath on the back of his neck before being dragged screaming into the brush. Flashlights whipped back and forth, shadows danced. The forest was chaos. Every man shouted, fired, stumbled, cursed, but the monster seemed untouchable. Bullets hit it, but each shot only made it angrier. Another soldier tried to stab at it with his bayonet when it lunged too close. The blade struck its side, but instead of piercing deep, it barely scratched the thick hide. The beast backhanded him with such force that his body hit a tree and crumpled. The survivors pulled back into a tight group, rifles blazing in every direction. "It won't go down," one screamed. The beast let out another roar, circling them, eyes glowing in and out of the darkness. Then it charged again, leaping higher than seemed possible. It landed in the center of the group, scattering them like leaves. Men fell. Guns clattered. The forest echoed with cries of pain and fury. One soldier managed to get a clear look at it as it pinned another to the ground. Its mouth opened wide, saliva dripping from yellowed fangs, its hot breath reeking of rot. The pinned man screamed as the jaws snapped shut inches from his face. Another soldier unloaded a magazine point blank into the beast's side. The monster howled and staggered, finally releasing its victim. But instead of retreating, it turned on the shooter, eyes burning with rage. It lunged, claws slashing, and the man barely had time to scream before he was gone. At this point, panic had broken discipline. The soldiers were no longer fighting as a unit, they were just trying to survive. Some fired wildly into the trees, others ran a few steps before being pulled back by the monster's unnatural speed. The patrol leader tried desperately to regain control. "Stay together, stay together," he yelled. But even he was shaking. The beast was unlike anything they had ever faced. It wasn't just fast or strong, it felt intelligent. It was attacking with purpose, targeting the weak, breaking the group apart one by one. For a brief moment, the soldiers caught another clear glimpse of it in the flashlights. Towering, covered in matted fur, claws as long as knives, and a face locked in a twisted snarl. The sight burned into their memories, a vision they would never forget. The fight raged on for what felt like hours but was likely only minutes. Then, as quickly as it had begun, the attack slowed. The beast retreated just beyond the tree line, glowing eyes visible once again. It paced back and forth, growling, testing them, as if deciding whether to finish the kill. The soldiers didn't move. Weapons raised, eyes locked on those burning orbs, they stood in terrified silence. Blood dripped onto the gravel, bodies lay scattered. The forest seemed to wait. And then, just as suddenly as it had appeared, the beast melted back into the darkness. The growls faded. The trees swallowed it whole. Silence returned. But the soldiers knew it wasn't over. The beast had only retreated, and when it came back, they might not survive the next attack. The forest had fallen quiet again, but it wasn't a peaceful silence. It was the kind of silence that pressed against the soldiers' ears, that made their hearts pound louder than their footsteps. Somewhere in the dark, the beast was waiting. They all knew it. The survivors, 4 men now huddled together in the middle of the road. Their rifles trembled in their hands, magazines running low, adrenaline burning through their veins. Their uniforms were ripped, stained with dirt, sweat, and blood. 2 of them were badly wounded, one with a deep slash across his arm, the other limping from a claw mark that tore through his thigh. The patrol leader crouched low, scanning the tree line. His voice was low, calm, but edged with terror. "Stay tight. Watch each other's hips' backs. Don fit, let it split us up again." The men nodded, though their eyes betrayed doubt. They had seen bullets tear into the creature. They had seen it stagger, even bleed, but they had also seen it rise again, stronger, angrier, unstoppable. Suddenly, the sound of movement came again. Leaves crunching, twigs snapping, slow, deliberate footsteps pacing in a wide circle around them. The beast was playing with them, stalking them like prey. One soldier whispered, "It sets hunting us, just like a wolf does." The leader shook his head. "No, wolves kill quick. This thing, it sits enjoying this." That realization sent a shiver through all of them. Then from the right, glowing eyes flashed again. The men fired instantly, gunshots ripping through the night, but the eyes vanished. Laughter, low, guttural, not quite human, rumbled from the other side. The beast was toying with them, darting in and out of the shadows, never staying in one place. Suddenly a roar shook the air. The monster charged again, bursting from the trees. The men opened fire, bullets sparking off its hide, ripping through fur and flesh. The creature staggered, but it didn't stop. It slammed into the group, scattering them across the gravel. One soldier was knocked flat, his weapon skittering into the brush. The beast loomed over him, claws raised, ready to strike. The leader didn't hesitate. He rushed forward, firing a burst into the monster's face. The shots caught it in the eye and muzzle, spraying dark blood across the ground. The beast roared in fury, swiping blindly, giving the fallen soldier just enough time to crawl back. But even half-blinded, it didn't set fall. The limping soldier screamed, firing shot after shot into its chest. The creature turned on him, faster than anyone thought possible. With one swipe, it ripped the rifle from his hands. With the other, it tore through his vest, sending him sprawling. Blood poured from his wound as he screamed in agony. The others dragged him back, desperate to save him. They fired non-stop, trying to drive the monster away. At last, with a frustrated roar, the beast leapt back into the tree line. Panting, the survivors pulled the wounded man into the center. His breaths came fast and shallow. The claw marks were deep, and blood soaked his uniform. "We've got to move," the leader said. "If we stay here, Sepp will finish us." But moving wasn't simple. The limping soldier could barely stand, and ammunition was running dangerously low. Every man knew it. If the beast attacked again, they might not have enough firepower to hold it back. Still, they pushed forward, half carrying their injured comrade. Each step felt heavier than the last. The woods pressed closer, branches tangling overhead like twisted arms. Every rustle, every snap of a twig sent their hearts racing. Then, from the distance, came another sound. Howls, not one, but several. The men froze. Until now, they had believed it was only one creature, but the howls suggested otherwise. Either the beast was calling to others, or worse, there was a whole pack waiting in the shadows. The leader gritted his teeth. "Keep moving." Dawn, set, stop. They pushed on, faster now, their flashlights bouncing across the trees. Behind them, the footsteps grew louder again. The beast was following, stalking, waiting for the moment to strike. Suddenly, it lunged from the left, claws raking across the gravel as it swiped at the group. The men screamed and opened fire. Muzzle flashes lit the road like strobe lights. The beast roared, its massive frame twisting in the hail of bullets. One soldier hurled a flare, the red light bursting across the trees. For the first time, they saw the monster clearly. Its body was enormous, muscles bulging beneath the fur. Its claws gleamed like steel, each one longer than a man's hand. Its face twisted in fury, dripping with dark blood, one eye ruined from the earlier shot. The sight was enough to freeze the men in horror, but the flare also revealed something worse. Shapes moving in the distance, more glowing eyes, scattered among the trees. Watching, the leader shouted, "Run, now!" The survivors sprinted down the road, dragging the wounded man with them. Behind, the beast's roar shattered the night once more. It was coming, crashing through the trees with earth-shaking force. The men fired blindly behind them, flashes lighting the dark. They weren't fighting to kill anymore. They were fighting to survive one more second, one more step. And deep in their hearts, they knew this was no ordinary enemy. This wasn't an animal that could be tracked and hunted. This was something ancient, something unstoppable. A predator that had stalked the night long before they were born and would continue long after they were gone. The fight for survival had only just begun. The gravel crunched under their boots as the survivors stumbled down Bray Road, hearts hammering, lungs burning. Their formation had collapsed long ago. They were no longer a unit of disciplined soldiers. They were men running for their lives. Behind them, the forest exploded with noise. Branches cracked, trees shook, and the beast's roars echoed like thunder. Sometimes it seemed to be right on their heels, other times it vanished into silence, only to reappear closer, stalking them like a cat waiting for the perfect strike. The wounded soldier groaned with each step, his uniform soaked in blood. Two men half carried, half dragged him, refusing to leave him behind. The leader shouted encouragement, his voice raw. "Keep moving, Don set stop. If you stop, you die." But every stride was agony. Fear gnawed at their strength. The woods seemed endless, and the road stretched on like a cruel trap. Suddenly, the growl returned, low, guttural, vibrating through the ground. The men spun, flashlights catching a glimpse of the beast emerging from the tree line again. Its ruined eye glowed red in the flare's fading light. Its other eye blazed with fury. Its chest heaved, fur matted with blood, but still it moved with unnatural strength. "Contact," the leader yelled. The men opened fire, bullets sparking into the night. The beast staggered but pushed forward, each round slowing it for only a second before it pressed on. Then, without warning, it stopped. It stood at the edge of the road, panting, growling, pacing like a predator deciding whether to strike. For a moment, the men thought it would charge again, but instead it turned its head toward the trees. The howls returned, several, rising and falling, echoing like a chorus. The soldiers froze, their stomachs sank, more of them. The beast roared in answer, then vanished back into the forest. The footsteps faded, swallowed by the night. The silence that followed was unbearable. The men didn't trust it, but they weren't about to wait. They kept moving, stumbling faster, desperate to put distance between themselves and whatever still hunted them. Minutes stretched into hours. Time became meaningless. Every shadow felt alive. Every sound a threat, their nerves frayed, fingers twitching on triggers, but no more glowing eyes appeared. No more roars followed. The forest was eerily still. At last, the dim glow of a farmhouse light flickered ahead. Civilization, safety. The men nearly collapsed from relief. They stumbled toward it, dragging their wounded comrade, knocking desperately on the door. When the farmer opened it, his eyes went wide at the sight of bloodied, broken soldiers on his porch. Without hesitation, he pulled them inside. The men barricaded the doors and collapsed against the walls, rifles still in hand. The farmer tried to ask what had happened, but the soldiers couldn't answer. They were shaking, staring at the windows, listening for sounds only they could hear. The wounded man groaned in pain, the others too exhausted to move. Hours later, a military vehicle arrived. The soldiers were rushed out, their story quickly silenced under orders. Their commanding officers listened but exchanged doubtful looks. Official reports would later list animal attack or unknown assailant. No one wanted to admit that something impossible had stalked and nearly killed their men. But the survivors knew the truth. They had seen it. They had heard its roar, smelled its breath, felt its claws tear through flesh. No report could erase the memory burned into their minds. The towering wolf-like creature with burning eyes, intelligent hunger, and strength that defied explanation. The men never spoke of it openly again. Some were discharged, others reassigned, but in private they carried the story. Some drank to forget, others prayed to keep the nightmares away. A few returned to Wisconsin years later, staring down Bray Road at night, wondering if it was still there. The beast had spared them that night, or maybe it had simply lost interest. But deep down, every survivor believed the same thing. It wasn't gone. It never left. Somewhere in those woods, under the cold Wisconsin moon, it was still hunting. And they had barely escaped its wrath. The official reports never told the truth. On paper, the night was described as a wild animal incident. The military called it unverified contact, with vague notes about soldiers being attacked by a large predator. There were no mentions of glowing eyes, no descriptions of a hulking wolf-like creature that walked upright, and certainly no talk of how bullets barely slowed it down. The soldiers who lived through that night knew better. Each of them carried scars, not just on their bodies but on their minds. When they closed their eyes, they still saw those glowing orbs in the trees. They still heard the guttural growl that shook the ground beneath their boots. They still felt the crushing force of claws that tore through steel and bone as though they were nothing. But no one wanted to believe them. When one survivor finally told his story years later, people laughed. Some called it a drunken tale. Others accused him of confusing a bear attack with a local ghost story. A few believers leaned forward in silence, whispering the name they all knew, the Beast of Bray Road. That name had been around long before the soldiers' encounter. Local farmers had told stories of livestock mutilations, of shadows stalking their fields at night, of a wolfish figure seen crossing the road at impossible speeds. Drivers swore something huge had leapt across the pavement in front of their cars. Hikers claimed to feel eyes on them following them through the woods. The legend had lived for decades, passed down in hushed tones, growing darker with each retelling. But the soldiers' encounter was different. This wasn't a lone hunter stumbling into something strange. This wasn't a farmer mistaking a wolf for a monster. These were trained men, armed and disciplined, and even they could not fight it off. And what unsettled them most was the possibility that it hadn't been alone. Those howls they heard in the distance that night, they were not from one throat. They had carried across the woods like a chorus, overlapping, rising, and falling in chilling harmony. If one beast could bring a patrol of armed soldiers to their knees, what could a pack do? The survivors rarely spoke of it, even to each other. Some avoided Wisconsin entirely, never setting foot near Bray Road again. Others became obsessed, researching every story, every sighting, desperate to understand what had stalked them that night. A few disappeared quietly from public life, haunted until the end of their days. Meanwhile, the legend grew. Locals whispered about the soldiers' encounter, though the details were hazy, distorted by secrecy and rumor. Some said the military covered it up to avoid panic. Others claimed the government knew exactly what the creature was and had been monitoring it for years. There were even whispers that the beast was not a lone monster at all, but something unnatural, something created or cursed that could never die. To this day, travelers along Bray Road still report strange happenings. A driver might see a massive, fur-covered figure watching from the ditch. A farmer might find claw marks on his barn door too deep to be made by any normal animal. Hikers tell of footsteps pacing them from the tree line, keeping perfect rhythm with their own. Always close, always watching. And every so often, someone claims to hear that same growl, the one that shakes the earth and freezes the blood. For the survivors, the legend was not a story. It was memory, a night when the impossible became real, a night when a team of soldiers, men who thought they had seen everything, learned there are things in the dark that do not fear guns or training, things that were never meant to be explained. The Beast of Bray Road lives on, not only in whispers and stories, but in the scars and nightmares of the men who faced it. And maybe, just maybe, it waits for the next unlucky soul who dares to walk that road alone at night. Because legends are born for a reason, and this one has teeth.